Okay, I think we are ready to get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to your after-lunch session. And our topic here, Trailblazing Tomorrow, Practical AI of today and tomorrow. And super excited. We've really assembled a great panel of expert thought leaders, practitioners, professional services experts. And following Peter's session from a little bit earlier, this is really, I think, a perfect segue to be able to talk to you about use cases using Peter's examples and some of the other challenges that I think we are experiencing today in our workplace. And hopefully we'll leave you with all some practical ideas of things that you can sort of take back to your workplace and put into practice immediately. So let's start with some introductions. My name is Audrey Dunning, and I'm going to be moderating the panel today. I've been in the technology industry for a long time, 30 or more years. I've worked across hardware, software, professional services, and have certainly seen a lot of really interesting trends throughout my time frame. But I think it's fair to say, and those things, human-centered design and agile and cloud. But I think, as Peter said earlier, I feel really honored to be here leading this discussion because I think there's not likely to be anything as disruptive in my lifetime as this topic of AI. I would like to ask each of our panelists to maybe do an introduction for themselves, take a couple of minutes. I know we've heard from Peter a little bit, but maybe he wants to tell us if he's really a comedian or not when we get to him. So I'd like to start with Roman, and maybe this might be easier for you to use this one. Yeah.
Roman Kharkovski. I'm an engineer by training, master's degree in computer science. First few years of my career, I worked in a regional systems integrator as a developer. Then I joined IBM for 18 years. After that, I worked with Google, at Google for 6 years. This year, I joined a small consulting company, Carrick. Over these years with Google and IBM and Carrick, I worked with a couple of hundred Fortune 1000 companies, helping them solve all kinds of business issues and problems with technology, building systems for AI, data analytics, web applications, and other fun stuff.
Thanks. Hello again, Peter Mulford. The only thing I would add to my resume is I was introduced by Shola for my last speech, so how cool was that? That's the only thing new I would add.
Hey everyone, my name is Morgan Llewellyn. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Stellar. My background is I'm a behavioral economist by training. That's how I always introduce myself. That's what my PhD's in. But through my career, 20-some years in data science, data stack, grown a couple of consulting companies, sold them, worked for SaaS companies as well. But always come back to the behavioral economics, understanding what people are going to do with information and how do you help them make better choices.
Good afternoon, everybody. Eric Donnelly. I'm currently the head of architecture with Tri-State Capital Bank. I spent most of my career in the financial industry between Tri-State, PNC, and Capital One way back in the 90s. But I did have a nice little stint in the startup world, which I loved as it was all cloud native. I've had many roles over the years, head of architecture, ran infrastructure, engineering groups. But at the end of the day, my personal persona is as a coder. I love to write code, and I've been doing it since I was 14. So very happy to be here, very happy to be part of this group that I do not belong part of, but thank you all.
I guess I probably could ask you guys to use those mics, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what do you think? I think we have a pretty expert group here to get the conversation going. So I think the appropriate place to start, Peter talked about use cases, right? And organizations thinking about what are some of the use cases that are perhaps the most exciting and innovative opportunities for getting started either now or in the near term. So I would ask, each of you, when we can just maybe go down the line to maybe share, what are some of the things that you're seeing either within your organization or within the customers that you serve in some cases that you see or perhaps have the most potential or the most interesting for impact. So Roman.
Start with me. So I think with a recent focus on generative AI, LLMs, a lot of attention is on the generative part. And if you're in financial business or retail, you're thinking in financial specifically, what do I generate? Like, do I generate new images? That's not my business. Do I generate advertisements? Maybe that's relevant. So there's just so much discussion going on in that area. I feel near term, there's just as much or more value out of the LLM can be obtained by querying 90% of your data within a company that's just sitting there hiding and not available for any use and consumption. I'll give you an example. When I joined Carrick earlier this year, just as a 20% project, I figured, well, maybe I build a bot inside of the company because I was new, I didn't know any of the delivery folks with different skill sets. Whenever I wanted to know something, I'll have to go look at Google Drive with all of the resumes, and I figured, well, I'll just use ChatGPT and I'll build LLM chatbot so that I can ask questions, who has this kind of skill, who should I go to? So I built that project, runs internally, people are using it a little bit. Over time had added a few more and more features. It became more and more generic, and not a few months ago we started using that for some of the customer engagements as well. And that's really turned into a generic document Q&A project where we can basically harvest all of the data that the customers have just sitting there, completely idle, all of this dark data. Think of contracts, PDF files, again, could be resumes, could be lease agreements, could be mortgages, could be purchase orders, all of the other type of data that most likely companies are not using today. With LLMs, you can now extract data, run Q&A, summarization, and make it useful for the business. And in fact, I think that also opens new business models with the extractive part, classification, understanding, and detecting fraud in documents. And there are a lot of businesses today, I think, that act as a middleman between the sources of data and the final consumers. And those middlemen do manual labor. They hire hundreds or thousands of people to do very manual, boring tasks that can be completely automated. And these middlemen, both in travel industry or pick any industry, that work of labor, manual, boring stuff can be, for the most part, automated, if not completely eliminated by using LLM and extracting data, generating the content. I think that is very exciting, huge business opportunities. And frankly, it's not that hard to implement. We're doing a couple of projects with different customers, I can share a bit later, that it turns out it's a very generic approach that works very well across multiple different industries. There are some nuances, as always, but I think it's very, very promising. And we're really broke into completely new paradigm of this non-deterministic programming.
Thank you, Roman. I know we have some professional services organizations in the audience and probably be interested in your initial use case for your internal use as well.
Cool.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Roman. That was cool. I think my favorite example I've seen so far also comes from one of our professional services clients, and I have to say, I have to hand it to the client. We helped them arrive at it, but it was their idea. And this was the problem. The problem was they have a hiring freeze, like a lot of companies do, because of the slowdown in tech. You know, go back to the start of the year, which a lot of people are experiencing. And the problem they discovered was they had done a lot of hiring just before the slowdown, but the senior partners at this professional services company were not available to coach and mentor the younger new hires. And so it was showing up in a number of different ways. It was showing up in their business practice survey, where younger consultants were saying, I'm not getting any direction around here. I'm sick of e-learning. Where's my boss? I haven't talked to her in a month, you know, things like that. And then the senior partners were complaining, well, our new talent hasn't ramped up fast enough. So I feel like I've fallen backwards in my career. And I'm doing all the, you know, the going out and having the executive level conversations. And I'm also doing all the work I did 10 years earlier in my career. So we went in, and it's just so much fun. You can see what's coming, right? Can you see it? So we took a version of a large language model. And the first iteration was just fine-tune the model to act like one of your customers
and then let the model give you feedback on whatever your proposal is. So these younger consultants would go in and they would submit proposals, or they'd have sales conversations with the AI. And it was never perfect, but it was enough because the model had been fine-tuned that when they finally got together with a partner who was stressed because she's like, I'm working 24/7, the younger consultant was able to say interesting things like, well, if our customer goes this way, I thought I'd say this. And she'd be like, well, where did you even get that idea from? And it was from the AI. And then you can imagine what happened. The partners liked this so much, they started fine-tuning their own version of it so that their younger consultants could have the conversations that they'd want them to have, but in a safe, simulated environment. So before you knew it, you had a simulated version of this customer. This customer is a 50-year-old engineer, and then this customer is a 35-year-old non-native English-speaking technician. And then before you know it, then they started simulating difficult conversations. Oh, gotta get ready for a hard conversation? Let's create a version of the LLM that's a crabby 45-year-old person from X country, or a really excited but inarticulate person from that country. And before you know it, now they have all these models where they use it to give younger consultants a chance to practice conversations. That's not enough. It's, after you do this, it's not that now you're ready to go out into the world, but by the time they get to the partner for the human interaction, anywhere between 30 and 50% of the heavy lifting is already done. So pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Really great. Good stuff. Morgan.
Yeah, hi everyone. So a couple of things. I'll probably take this in a slightly different direction, only because I want to key in how to get started. So I think these are really good suggestions. When you've got a lot of documents, LLMs are going to help you structure and organize that information, putting them together and allowing folks to interact with it quicker. 100%, that seems to be a good use case of where we see a lot of customers starting. We work with a lot of large organizations too. Think government, enterprise, very complex organizations. And when they're thinking about getting started, where we always start with is guidelines. This is a new thing. Something new has happened, and these large organizations don't have the tools or the framework in place by which to evaluate, can I use this or not? And so that's typically the place that we start with for large organizations, is putting together guidelines and a framework of how do you even evaluate new technology as it's coming down the pipeline. Is this something your organization can accept, or do you have to reject it based on privacy, security concerns? And so starting and being able to have a clear, here are our guidelines by which we're going to evaluate any new technology that's going to use data, that seems to be a place that we see a lot of organizations gravitating towards, and it provides a flexible format to really be able to then evaluate a number of new technologies, whether it be today or in the future. So having an AI guidelines policy in place, that's a place that we'd recommend starting.
Eric.
Thanks. And Morgan kind of stole some of my approach a little bit, so we've got to practice better next time. Right? No, but I'm going to follow the trend on kind of not necessarily primetime commercial quality AI engagements, but something a bit more kind of pragmatic that organizations can adopt without having to completely retool or modernize their technology stacks. I've got 3 examples that I think are great opportunities where organizations can begin the journey, and it is absolutely a journey. One of the first ones, which I've had the opportunity to now do a couple of times in the last couple of years, organizations of any age still deal with documents, whether they're in boxes in Iron Mountain or whether they're still coming in every single day into the mail. With AI, the OCR capabilities that are out there in the cloud, my personal experiences with both AWS and Azure are phenomenal. It removes weeks and months of training your OCR tools to pull the data. What used to take you months can now be achieved literally in hours by pulling that data out. Very simple, very pragmatic, does not require a full kind of re-architecture of all of your applications in order to start consuming AI. A second example, and one that's a little kind of closer to my heart, as I come from a software engineering background, who's been reading about all the Copilot progress that's been out there and happening over this last several months? That is a great tool. I got to read an evaluation lately of an organization that's been doing a proof of concept with it over the last several months. They believe they can achieve a 20 to 30% productivity from their developer organizations, increase in productivity from their development organizations by using something like Copilot. My personal opinion, I think it is way underestimated. I believe the productivity is going to be significantly higher. I've cheated myself a little bit on working on a few things, did some proof of concepts. There is a concern that these tools are going to not help our engineers grow and become better. I don't think I share that concern. I had a situation recently myself where I had to work on something. The way I was going to solve it was going to be like 50 lines of code that I did not want to take the time to write. So I figured, hey, I'm going to go to my buddy Chat and have him whip it up for me and help me save all that time. Well, it did save me the time, but also showed me an alternative approach to solving the problem. One that I'm a little embarrassed I didn't think of myself, but it was still a great learning opportunity. So the tools can just be more than shortcuts. It can also help learn and help our engineers grow. The third is around emails, around social media, and using the capabilities around sentiment reviews and even doing your natural language processors to help take these messages and go, oh, we have a problem here with our customer. We need to move this one up higher into the priority list, higher in the to-do list to reach out to deal with this potentially damaging, reputational type of issue. Sentiment analysis has been around for years. My first go at it was actually with Google a bunch of years ago. But with AI, it has gotten significantly more reliable and more relevant to help organizations move on. Those are my three.
Great. Thank you, Eric. There's lots of next level insights, I think, that we could talk about related to some of these different examples. But one thing that comes to mind for me, and I know Peter touched on it this morning, and I'm curious about this in both how you, if you're in the vendor services role, speak to your customers about business value, or if you're a technology leader in an organization, you convince the C-suite to invest. Peter alluded to generating revenue or saving costs as some of the obvious business value insights from investing in these initiatives. And just curious, and this is for anyone who wants to answer, any kind of recommendations or best practices for, all of us in terms of how to go about doing that effectively?
Evaluating the ROI. Evaluating the ROI.
Right, just talking about business value, sort of like ROI in an ideal world, but just, in terms of the business value of investing in AI in these initiatives. Any ideas, recommendations, Roman?
I'm happy to talk about this. I've been in a pre-sales capacity for too many years, so that was my full-time job to talk about not just technology but also ROI. And there's a big contrast when at Google, when we were selling, say, for example, Kubernetes, GKE service, you're having one kind of conversation. And trust me, to convince someone that GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, has a good ROI is a very difficult discussion compared to selling the business value of AI and how quickly you can deliver. It's night and day. I'd say a couple of orders of magnitude different because you can show a quick prototype. In fact, it's public information, been in the papers, so I'm not going to disclose any secrets. Recently was U.S. Steel announced partnership with Google, and that conversation took less than a week to go from a initial discussion, first meeting with the customer, to a working prototype.
So show something quickly.
It is very quick, and when the results are in, it's very easy to quantify them in business terms. Super easy. It's a lot of times it's a very easy discussion.
Eric, you were smiling, so I know you have some thoughts on this.
No, I was smiling about how everyone was so quick to respond to your question.
Yeah.
But thank you for busting me. So, I think as organizations, look to tackle this, I think a lot of it is the how. What are the processes? What are the things that we need to do? Coming from a regulated industry, there's going to be a lot of concerns about how we tackle that in such a way that doesn't, create risk or make the regulators unhappy as well. Honestly, I think it's pretty straightforward to some extent, although it is easier said than done. But be purposeful. Know what you're trying to accomplish. Have very specific goals. Measure them. And as you're looking to adopt and roll it out, don't try to reinvent the wheel day one. Especially larger organizations, you have risk frameworks, you have approvals, you have cadences, you have SDLC. All these models still need version controlled as you're going through and evolving through the items. So, take it piece by piece. I'm a fan of progress over perfection. And so take those pieces, make that little bit of progress, get the win, get the excitement, get the value behind it, and then move to the next. It'll build on itself and create the larger outcomes over time without the significant investment ahead of time.
And then if I can add on that, I would just encourage folks to think about it two different ways, right? One is straight replacement of existing tech. So there was a great use case that we've done, and I think was mentioned here, where you can essentially use a large language model as a parsing technology today. So being able to extract really valuable information and then be able to put it into some existing workflow. That's a replacement of an existing parsing engine. So what's just the ROI of moving from a known solution that has a cost to a large language model? That's easy math. The other point that I would think about is it really comes back to time and automation. And that's where I see the real value in a lot of what we're doing. It's around automation. If you think about, generative AI or AI in general, what it's really good at is generating decisions really, really fast. Well, generating a decision without having an action on top of that doesn't really capture the value. And so if you're looking to understand what is the value prop of this generative AI thing I'm going to roll out, factor in the time component and how do you automate some of the actions in an existing process, right? I don't have to automate everything, but if I just automated this one step, what does that do in terms of time? And go for the things that I would almost say are like the no-brainers, right? Those big opportunities where you don't have to get it to the penny to have it make sense. If you're off by a factor of 2, it still makes sense. Like focus on those big opportunities, focus on time, or just a straight parts replacement. That's typically how we think about it.
Peter, anything you want to share? You meet obviously with a lot of executives and needing to speak about the business value of these investments. Thoughts?
Yeah, two thoughts actually popped in my head as I was listening to Roman, and it's simply this. I find that what's cool about AI, and it was also cool about Kubernetes, but never mind, is that it allows you to do things you've always wanted to do, but that were physically impossible or financially impractical in the past. That's the thing. So there are things your CEO wants to do, that she has energy around related to costs and people and productivity, but it's just probably not occurred to her that she can do these things because before AI, physically impossible to do them or financially impractical. So that's the first thing. And what emerges out of that is, before you start having a conversation around use cases or ROI or technology, you want to make sure your leaders have digital literacy. And by that, I simply mean your leaders need to understand what AI can and cannot do, how to think strategically about using it, and how to talk to anyone about 1 and 2. What it can do, how to think strategically, and how to talk to anyone. And by anyone, I mean to regulators, to customers, to vendors, to younger machine learning engineers. And that's what I found is the magic sauce. Once an executive realizes that, it's actually so easy, then the AI initiative almost always takes off, because she doesn't have to be persuaded of anything. In fact, more often, and I've seen this with my own 2 eyes, I've seen chief executives who are like, I'm not waiting for the consultants to come to me. I already know what I need to do, so they'll go out to the consultants and say, you, get over here. Well, let me sell you, blah, 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 blah. No, don't sell me anything. Tell me how you're going to solve this problem with either a convolutional neural network or with a large language model. And the vendor will be like, how'd you even know that? That's not important. So I would say that's the first step before any of this. Equip your leaders to be able to speak the language of AI. And they're smart business people. That's how they got to be leaders in the first place. And they'll just grab it and go.
I want to build on that a bit and talk, maybe shift a little bit about innovation culture in general within organizations. So if anyone listened to Peter Coffey's opening keynote yesterday, he talked about innovation is not a natural act. And I think he used a cave dweller example of, humans are more inclined to refine than innovate. So it's not really a natural behavior. So driving innovation culture within organizations takes special insights, behaviors, tools. And I just would like to ask each of you, what are some of the best practices that in your experience you've seen work inside of organizations? Maybe we'll just go down the line on this one, Roman.
I don't know about the statement that innovation is not a natural act. I think there are types of people that like to do the same thing every day, and there are types of people that like to innovate. I know where I tend to gravitate. That's one thing. Another thing, even if you have people in the organization that do like to innovate, without proper incentive structure and support structure, it's very unlikely anything will happen. They'll probably try once or twice. They'll see that it just disappears like water in the sand and will stop doing it. So you have to maintain that interest. You have to incentivize them. And incentives could be in different kinds of ways. Some people need financial incentives, maybe stock type of stuff, or others just need recognition and support and ability to help them achieve that final goal. That may be more important than financial. So incentivizing the people, supporting them, and creating a culture, I think is important. And then there are other things as well in terms of innovation. The way that the work is organized, we can maybe dive into that a little bit later, but I feel creating the culture and proper incentives is really the key.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks for that, Roman. I would add to that. I think for me, the biggest shift you would want to make is a shift from planning and waiting to testing and learning. And it's kind of a buzzwordy thing to say, fail fast and cheap and move forward fast and cheap. I think everybody gets that. The uncommon sense that's buried in that, the unnatural bit, is it's natural for most successful people to plan and wait, to do the ROI analysis, to cross your T's, to analyze and research before you make decisions. And what's interesting about the world today is it has actually gotten to a place there where it is more expensive, paradoxically, to plan and wait than it is to test and learn. So that's the kind of the shift, the mindset shift you've got to help leaders get through. And related to that, the wonderful thing about testing and learning that isn't always obvious is it's the most powerful way to engage the resistors. Because you want to have skeptics in a test and learn situation because they're the ones who are going to tell you why it won't work. And you can convert their skepticism into an assumption, and then all of a sudden you've gone from, I don't like talking to that person because he's always saying no, to, thank you for that, I'm going to take your no and I'm going to convert it into an assumption and then feed my innovators. We're just going to gobble that stuff down. So the more people resist, the more energy the innovators get, because they're like, thank God, I've got another assumption to test. Thank you, Mr. Skeptic. And that's how you can literally convert resistance and skepticism into an energetic force that pushes innovation forward. But you have to have the discipline of fast and cheap experimentation, otherwise it just falls apart.
Right, you got me thinking about the 6 thinking hat exercise and how you have this.
Oh, de Bono?
Yes, the white hat or the black hat person. Morgan.
Yeah, so one thing I think is really important is learning, right? So how do you keep learning in your organization? And how many people here have seen brown bag lunch kind of seminars and those types of things? I come from an academic background initially. But I see a number of hands. How many people who raised their hand saw positive outcomes or results from those brown bag luncheons? Oh, we got some hands. Those were really well run. I'm impressed. I want to find out what you did. The fact of the matter is, though, yes, you need to embrace a learning organization, but the goal is not learning. The goal is outcomes. And so it's not about innovation. itself. It's about innovative outcomes. And so that's what I would stress. That really is part of the structure and the organization of these innovative programs, or the culture, is how do you stress achieving an outcome? Good or bad, doesn't matter, right? Fail fast. Like that, it's okay to fail, but how do you achieve a known result, whether it's good, whether it's bad? That would be the thing I'd focus on, is the outcome piece of the innovation, and get folks to innovative outcomes. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. Hopefully you'll see more good than bad, though.
We need to switch chairs. In all seriousness, following on Morgan's thoughts a little bit, this morning I went into Google Maps and I said, hey, give me the step-by-step instructions for creating innovative culture. And it just couldn't do it yet, So still waiting for that. But seriously, earlier I mentioned about, kind of being intentional, being purposeful. Creating the culture, it is something that an organization does need to make a priority, right? Hackathons have been really popular over the last several years. You have tiger teams. Create those opportunities and where people can be innovative, where they can think about solving problems differently than they have in the past. Morgan talked about the outcomes, and I think that's really key. You need to set goals, then drive towards something that adds value to the business and creates excitement for the people who've worked on it. Because if they don't feel happy about the problem that they've solved, they're not going to want to participate again. The human aspect really, really is important. The one thing I did want to touch on, which for those of you who know me, is going to point out some of my PTSD. Organizations want to be agile. And when a lot of them tackle agile, they've brought in coaches, they've brought in industry experts to help them with that transition. I don't know if I would treat this any differently. An organization of leaders who are used to doing X, Y, and Z, asking them to now do ABC without that external leader, those people to help them make the transition, I think it makes it harder, So don't underestimate the value that an industry leader could bring in helping with that transition.
Great, thanks, Eric. We're going to open up in just a minute for questions, but before we do that, I wanted to shift gears one more time and talk a little bit about the vendor landscape. So, Peter, I know you just came back from Dreamforce. I think you gave a very similar talk to what you gave this morning at Dreamforce. AI everywhere, lots of conversations at Salesforce. Hike2 is a very significant Salesforce partner, as well as others in the room. And just the vendor landscape in general, like all the announcements in the last few weeks, how are the vendors going to make money? What's the economic model and the vendor landscape here? And sort of race to the bottom with generative AI. What do you see with the economic model? And maybe a few of you would like to comment on that. Peter.
That's a really interesting question. I need a second to think about that. If you've got an answer ready to go,
right.
yeah.
So let's talk about the value of content and what we're seeing in the space. So where are vendors going to make money? If everyone has an LLM, and anyone can implement an LLM in a matter of hours, right? With coding tools and all these other things, what's the differentiator and the value of having an LLM against another competitor? Almost nothing. LLMs are great at generating content really, really fast. And if I'm going to generate a recommendation, what's the difference between asking that LLM to generate 1 recommendation, 10 recommendations, 100 recommendations? In time and money, it's almost indifferent. And so for me as an organization, how do I differentiate and get value out of that LLM? It's using my own proprietary data to understand what is the best recommendation. Was it the first one? Was it the 10th one? Was it the 73rd one? And so where I see this going is it's actually going to reinforce the value of proprietary data, reinforce the value of the insights that you have locked in your database, and that's where the money is to be made. It's not in the implementation of an an LLM itself. Off-the-shelf models are going to continue to get better and better and better. It's not going to be, yes, there'll be some infrastructure and hosting opportunities, but the real value of these LLMs is going to be how do you incorporate into your own proprietary data? And I think that's where the vendor landscape is going to move in using an LLM up front, but really setting up a more sophisticated model network underneath of that to be able to get the right recommendations to the right people at the right time.
I think I've got so just to make sure I'm understanding the question you're asking, how will the vendors actually make money? So the Microsofts, the Googles, whatever. I think what it is if you think about any company's source of competitive advantage, simplistically, it's can I get attractive positioning in attractive markets? Right? That's it. It's the marketplace I'm in, where I'm choosing to compete, the channels I'm competing in, the value proposition I'm trying to offer, and then can I offer something that is advantage to the next best alternative. So what I think you'd notice, if you watch all these announcements, read the fine print, and Microsoft and Google and Adobe, they're all going to reveal to you what their source of competitive advantage is and what they expect you to pay for it. So by way of example, you probably saw the news last week or the week before that Zoom has a large language model built into their platform. What are they charging you for it? Nothing. It's just as good as many of the other large language models, but that's not how they're going to win. They're not going to try and make money by selling you value-added generative AI. They just want you on the platform. On the other hand, Microsoft 365, how are they making their money? Well, they want you to use their suite of productivity tools. So they're embedding it in Word, they're embedding it in Bing, they're embedding it all over the place. But they are going to charge you for it because that's how they make their money. They're not really that worried about you switching from Office to something else at this stage. They know they've got you, and not in a mean-spirited way. I mean, the nice thing, Microsoft's one of our clients. And when Satya Nadella gets on stage and he talks about caring about customers, that's how he is behind the scenes too. It's just not a marketing play. He genuinely means it. So he'll charge you for it. Salesforce, what are they doing? They're LLM agnostic. BYO LLM. You want to go with Gemini? Salesforce says, great. You want to go with OpenAI? Salesforce says, great. Why? Because they're not in it to try and get money from you by charging you for the LLMs. They want you to use the Einstein trust layer and all of the things that they'll do to keep you safe and secure, and that's what they'll charge you for. So all of that is to say, rather than tell you what I think each company is going to be doing, reverse engineer it. Watch what they're doing, and it will reveal to you everything you need to know about their where to play and how to compete choices, and more importantly, how they're going to innovate going into the future.
Great. Roman, anything you'd like to add?
I'd say from a consultant perspective, now that I'm wearing my consultant hat for the last half a year, I think it's not as straightforward as, well, what is the best LLM? It's much more complicated than that, because most likely, just like in any technology, think about what used to be the biggest buzzword, the big data. You don't yet just use a single tool for big data. You have to be able to build the data ingestion pipeline, the storage, the data warehouse, and analytics, and MapReduce. There are many different components. With LLMs, you still have all of the traditional MLOps, but most likely for any real application, for that Zoom application or anything else, you're going to end up building multiple chains of these agents and LLMs feeding into each other and figuring out whatever it is that they need to accomplish to achieve your goals. So it's building, designing, and using the right tool for the right job. And every day there are more and more of these LLMs, open source, commercial, proprietary, all kinds of different models available. So maybe there will be LLM one day that will tell you which LLM is the best. But for now, you need consulting companies to select and design proper approach, because the truth is most of the companies that are maybe minus Fortune 500 or 100 don't really have the data science teams that are big enough to really be able to keep track of all of this stuff. And one of the things that I think that we can do as an industry, as on the provider side, is make what I call zero machine learning expertise required. Like for instance, one of the projects that I built before leaving Google was anomaly detection for manufacturing that required zero machine learning expertise from the customer. It was completely out of the box solution where all of these massive amounts of data that sit at manufacturer from all of the PLCs and other telemetry data was never really tapped for any intelligence. So what we built a solution for anomaly detection. You just deploy it with, I call it a couple of clicks, and it just starts working. The customer does not need to hire data scientists and pay them $1 million a year salary. They just deploy that solution, and they're ready to go in a few hours.
Thank you all. We have time for some questions. So what sorts of things are on your minds? Do I have a roving mic person? Here we go.
So I have a concern that AI is going to expose exactly how poor most people's data is, and that's going to be probably the one barrier to adoption. So how are you seeing senior teams addressing this, particularly if they don't have strong data analytics skills?
Anyone like to take that? Eric.
I'm going to come at it a little differently than maybe what you would expect. The first time I took over a role as the chief architect, the CIO of the company I was at, and keep in mind I come from a software engineering background. He said, Eric, the one thing architecture needs to do is create transparency to enable better business decisions. Had nothing to do about cool technology, right? Well, one of the things about creating that transparency and the better decision making is forcing yourself to use the data that you have. Everyone's data is bad. And you know how bad it is when you start to use it. My opinion, I think you're right. I think utilizing these tools and these models are going to show gaps in our organization's data, but that's a good thing because that's the only way we're going to fix it is by acknowledging it's there and tackling it.
I can just add
One
real
other
quickly.
quick comment, and then we'll go.
Yeah. I normally tell my customers, do not ever throw away your data. Keep it if it's compliant with any regulations, because you never know how you're going to use it later. And it turns out that even old data very often is extremely useful, and some data is better than no data.
There you go. We have a question here.
So if I may ask this question, right? I think about technology divide or digital divide. What opinions or point of view do you have with some of the bigger companies moving or charging ahead with AI and leaving some of the smaller companies behind, probably because this needs a new type of skilling or talent, and obviously technology stack can be a bit challenging as well. So there's always that digital divide that we keep talking about. Any thoughts on that between countries, communities, technology companies, and people?
So my thought here, and I'll take it from a perspective of someone who has a PhD in behavioral economics and all the statistics, all that good stuff. I see these technologies as a great leveler and actually bringing, narrowing that gap, that divide, because you don't need to go and hire data science. I wouldn't recommend go and hire a data scientist as your first hire if you're going after LLMs. You need software engineers, you need business people who understand the outcome you're trying to achieve. You actually don't necessarily need that data science function depending on how you're approaching it. And so I think it actually makes the deployment of these opportunities a lot easier with things like large language models, because you're essentially taking the data science out of the AI. Because previously we had to go and have a use case and train a specific model for that use case, and then we go and deploy it and we test it and we do all these other things, right? And that needs a data scientist. Now you've got this off-the-shelf model that can work for a number of use cases, and you don't need the data scientist there to go and retrain that model. So I think there's a little bit of a level happening and an opportunity to actually bring, narrow that gap. Well, there's another shoe to drop, right? So yes, and then no. So to get the initial capability, yes, you don't need those data scientists. But if you look back to something I said just a few minutes ago, how do now you differentiate yourself? Now you do need to bring in potentially some AI and ML, kind of traditional. And so while I think you will see that narrowing of that gap initially, there is an opportunity in the future for larger organizations to differentiate themselves if they're able to use those recommendations in a way other organizations can't. But I'm optimistic that that problem will be overcome. Let's focus on the good news in the short term.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Ed.
I don't know if this is a question, but thank you. There's an example in the next talk at 2 p.m. AdScate where they took a big LLM off the shelf and then made their own little one that like plugged into it, like so they kind of had two. Is this something you guys have seen before where people are taking the big LLMs from the four big guys and making them their own? Is that a common pattern?
Anyone like to take that?
Sure, I can swing at that. I mean, to Morgan's point, the way to think about the democratizing effect of a large language model, the easiest way to think about it is the reason it's amazing is regardless of where you are in the world, doesn't matter who your parents were, doesn't matter how much money you had, doesn't even really matter what your education was. If you can express your idea in your own language, you're a coder now. You are. You can actually interact with these incredibly powerful technologies. Now, there's some exceptions. Of course, like in Saudi Arabia, yet you still don't have access, and LLMs can't understand certain languages. For the most part, that's the democratizing piece. To your specific observation, or to the question, is, what do you see people doing with this? And I think Pam might have talked about this in the morning. They're basically doing one of four things. They are either A, taking a pre-existing model and fine-tuning it. I know that's been up on a slide a couple times. If you don't know what that means, it simply means you can crack it open and you can say, you could convince it tomorrow. You could convince ChatGPT tomorrow that Paris is the capital of Texas. You can actually do that with embeddings and fine-tunings. It takes a little bit of work, but you can go in and manipulate it. That's option one. Option two is create your own model. An example of this is Bloomberg GPT. If you've heard about Bloomberg GPT, they just said, to heck with it, we're going to build this thing from scratch. What's amazing about that is it's actually quite smaller than ChatGPT in terms of just how big it is, the parameters, but didn't matter because they're very clever at Bloomberg. They figured out we don't need it to be that big to be the best financial analyst. So that's your second route. A third route you can go, which I think Pam also talked about, is this expression, you're going to hear it a lot, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, RAG. It's basically a way where you can take one of these existing models and you can connect it to other sources of data and then customize it that way. Those aren't the only ways you can do it, but those are the three most common ways you can do it. And whichever one works for you largely has to do with the talent you have and the need you have for customization. Bloomberg felt to be differentiated, I need my own thing. Moody's Copilot is based on ChatGPT. They're like, I don't need my own model to be competitive, but I need it to be fine-tuned using Moody's data. So those are the common ways.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, maybe quantify the effort. So between the retrieval augmented generation, fine-tuning, or business your own model, the RAG takes a couple of dollars and about 5 minutes. Fine-tuning takes maybe $100 and about an hour. Building your own model takes about a year and millions of dollars, just to put it in perspective.
So great. I think we need to wrap here, but before we do, I guess in closing, I'd like to just do a quick round robin and have each of you maybe share with the audience some of your best resources, books, podcasts, others related to either innovation or learning about AI, getting started? Just quick thoughts. Roman.
I guess I'll do one resource and one shameless plug. For the resource, I think my favorite business book of all times by far is The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. I would highly recommend it. It's a really awesome book. The shameless plug is tomorrow at the Google Developer Group in Google Office here in Bakery Square. I'll be presenting the demonstration and hands-on and a bit of a quasi-technical deep dive into how we build LLM applications at Carrick Group. You're welcome to join. It's free. You need to register for Google Developer Group, and from 3 to 5 tomorrow, there will be some food and drinks after the technical talk, so you're welcome to join us tomorrow.
Thank you. Peter.
Go ahead, I need a minute.
Okay.
All right, so my piece, my resource I would recommend stems from conversations I have where people always say, we can't do LLMs, they're not secure. And they lump in this idea of things they've read or heard about regarding ChatGPT with security concerns of LLMs in general. And so the resource I would kind of guide you to is go to OpenAI's website and take a look at their security document and the security policy they have in place. That would be the resource I would guide folks to, and take a look at the fact that this is SOC 2 and this is TLS and that there are all these other pieces included. It's not ChatGPT, it's OpenAI. But take a look at that security document and get a little more comfortable with what's going on in the LLM space.
Eric, did he do it again? No.
No, actually, no. I tend to be pretty informal on such things. A topic comes up that I find that it interests me, then I spend weeks obsessively Googling, reading different counterpoints, reading various articles, seeing the competitions, the debates, and then when in doubt, I'm always phoning friends. Yes, for those of you who know me, I do have friends, but I do phone friends.
Great, thank you. And I'll just add, Peter, you want to add something?
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
my suggestions to the group are, if you're going to read one thing, I would read The Algorithm by MIT Sloan. It's a weekly publication that is just about artificial intelligence, and the editor she's really, really thoughtful about the range of topics she gets into. And if you want to do something a little bit more hands-on, every 48 hours, just type into YouTube, AI, that's it. Wait for the interesting lectures to pop up. Some of it is garbage. It's, people sitting in a living room going, hey, I know AI, but then all of a sudden physics conference at MIT, or there's Elon Musk and Benjamin Netanyahu debating. Then use your ChatGPT, use your plugin and say, please watch this entire YouTube video, convert it into text and tell me what the key points are. 30 seconds, you'll know what's on that 1 hour thing, and then you can decide whether to watch it or not. And when you do, ride your Peloton. So you get your exercise for your body and your brain simultaneously.
There you go. There's some great advice. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate the time and the preparation, and hope this was great for all of you as well. Thank you.